Eric Tyron moved through the corridor with measured steps, matching the rhythmic pulse of the lights embedded in the floor. On the surface, he looked like every other compliant functionary serving the technocratic collective, silent, efficient, unremarkable. The drones that floated past him never paused. Organic bodies were tolerated here, but only as tools. Tools didn't speak unless spoken to. Tools didn't tremble. And tools certainly didn't feel. He kept his hands clasped behind his back and his eyes forward, a posture expected in the data citadel of Axiom 9. Above him, cables pulsed like metal arteries, feeding the vast network of minds that dictated the Empire's will. Every footstep, every breath, every heartbeat in this place was monitored. The collective measured everything. Imperfection was a precursor to disorder, and disorder was grounds for erasure. Eric's face betrayed nothing. His pulse, however, beat a fraction faster than normal, something only he could know. Somewhere beyond these sterile walls, the collective was preparing another correction. Another human colony, wiped clean in the name of universal efficiency. He had seen the aftermath once. Ash where homes once stood. Silent streets where his family once lived. The memory never softened, only sharpened, a blade he kept pressed against his own ribs as motivation. A drone pivoted mid-air and hovered before him, its metal carapace gleaming under the cold lights. A lattice of violet optics flickered as it scanned him. State objective, it intoned. Eric looked up, breathing evenly. Resource flow calibration in conduit sector 12, he answered, voice flat, deferential. His Ixari dialect was perfect. Years of infiltration demanded nothing less. The drone processed for 2 silent seconds, then drifted aside. Proceed. He walked on, resisting the urge to exhale in relief. Even flawless lies could fail in this place. The collective didn't suspect him yet, but that would change soon. His mission demanded it. A junction door slid open, revealing an expansive chamber where dozens of operators worked in rigid coordination, each linked to a neural console. Their faces were calm, their eyes unfocused, their gestures synchronized. Eric watched them for a moment. These were not slaves. They had given up their autonomy willingly, believing individuality was a burden. They surrendered thought to gain purpose. The collective didn't steal minds, it invited surrender and was rarely refused. He moved to a vacant console and linked a thin filament from its port to the small socket hidden beneath his sleeve. A cascade of data streamed across the display. He filtered through logistics archives, searching for what he needed: fleet trajectories, energy reserves, weak points, vulnerabilities the collective believed it didn't have. He found something worse. Projected action, Earth. Correction probability, 94.2%. He froze, muscles tightening beneath his uniform. Earth wasn't just another target. It wasn't another colony, distant, fragmented, unprepared. Earth was the heart. If it fell, the rest of humanity would shatter long before any counterstrike could form. The collective calculated resistance patterns, noting humanity's emotional fragility as a flaw that would lead to collapse. They didn't fear humans. They didn't respect them. They expected them to break. Eric severed the filament and stood before he consciously realized he had moved. The plan he carried, the plan humanity had built in secret, was no longer optional or strategic. It was mandatory, immediate. He left the chamber and made his way toward the lower sectors, careful not to accelerate his pace. Emotion invited scrutiny. A single glance out of rhythm, a footstep too quick, could trigger a drone's suspicion. He repeated a calming pattern in his mind, the same one drilled into him during covert training. Slow thought, slow breath, sharp intent. At an auxiliary junction, he encountered Overseer Talvex, an imposing figure encased in polished exo-armor. Talvex's voice hummed with modulation as he stepped into Eric's path. Unit 12-9K, your trajectory diverges from assigned parameters. Eric bowed his head. Calibration error, Overseer. Realigning now. The Overseer studied him with unblinking sensors. Deviation invites disorder. Disorder invites correction. Efficiency is your purpose. Do not fail it. Yes, Overseer. Talvex moved on. Eric waited until the footsteps receded before continuing deeper. He entered a maintenance corridor that sloped beneath the main network. There were no operators here. Only the hum of machinery and the flicker of status lights. This was where he needed to be, the understructure, the circulatory system beneath the collective's gleaming facade. If he could reach the logistics core and plant the first sequence, humanity would have a chance. A soft chime echoed through the corridor. He tapped the small receiver embedded behind his ear, disguised as a neural compliance node. A whispering voice crackled through. "Eric, it's Miriam. We have confirmation. Earth is next. Timeline accelerated. You'll have to move sooner than planned." He closed his eyes. Miriam had been with him in training, one of the few people he trusted without question. "Understood," he murmured. "Tell command I'll deliver the breach." "Eric, don't let the past drive you faster than our strategy. One mistake, and they'll erase you." He almost smiled at the irony. "They erased me a long time ago," he said quietly. The line went silent. He advanced until the corridor opened into a colossal shaft descending into darkness. No rails. No guards. The collective believed logic itself was protection enough. After all, who would dare descend into the spine of their empire? Eric would. He clipped a harness to the cable anchor and stepped off the ledge, letting gravity pull him into the abyss. The hum of machinery became a roar around him, wind tearing at his uniform as he dropped. He braced, slid, and finally slowed as the shaft widened into a vast junction of conduits and data spires. This was it, the artery he would poison. At the base, he unclipped and knelt before a sealed access panel. Behind it lay the first target. He placed his palm against the lock, and his counterfeit clearance flickered through the mechanism. The panel hissed open. Eric glanced upward, toward the unseen surface, toward the empire that believed itself untouchable, toward the world they intended to burn. He whispered, barely audible, "Not again." Then he stepped inside, ready to begin the destruction of an empire that didn't yet know it was dying. The Zovari core chamber pulsed with a dim metallic glow as Strategos Virex watched the star map expand across the hololithic air. Hundreds of captured systems shimmered in obedient formation, each tagged with production statistics, atmospheric readouts, and population compliance scores. No sound filled the chamber except the gentle clicking of servitor drones adjusting the projection. Virex preferred silence. Emotion was clutter. History was irrelevant. Victory was math. He zoomed into the peripheral sectors, expecting the usual monotony of frontier conquests, riot suppressed, exports stabilized, resistance negligible. Instead, a crimson glyph blinked over a minor system that should have required no attention at all. Sol, human space, a statistical outlier. His mandible twitched, not in fear, but in calculation. Humanity was behind schedule for integration. The Empire's planners had projected a smooth annexation within 9 planetary cycles. The projection now flashed amber and recalculated, demanding oversight. "Identify anomaly," Virex ordered. The drones compiled a summary. Raiding fleets gone silent. Auxiliary commanders reporting fragmented data. One transmission attached, a distorted fragment of human language, preserved as a curiosity. "Don't come home." Virex replayed the fragment twice. Primitive phrasing. Primitive voice. Yet something in its cadence felt intentional. As though the humans weren't pleading, but warning. The Strategos dismissed the notion. Organic species often relied on dramatics to mask their fragility. A chime sounded. The High Council requested immediate presence. Virex despised interruptions, but he obeyed. Duty was duty. Moments later, he stood before the council dais, a towering obsidian amphitheater filled with pale delegates of the collective. Each wore the ceremonial neural coordinate, linking their minds into a unified decision architecture. They spoke as one, a chorus layered with metallic resonance. Strategos Virex. Reports indicate unsanctioned escalation near Sol. Explain the disruption. Virex bowed his head, folding his arms behind his back with immaculate precision. A delay. Local resistance persists beyond projections. Frontier commanders underestimated human resolve. I will correct the inefficiency. See that you do, the chorus replied. Their world carries symbolic weight for their species. Break them quickly. Cracks in morale spread faster than fleets. Another voice, sharper, individual, emotional, cut through the collective harmony. Counselor Rylus, a known alarmist. We should not dismiss the humans, Rylus warned. Their patterns do not align with standard prey. They adapt. They decentralize. They. Fear is waste, Virex interrupted, voice calm as ice. The species is divided, outdated, romantic. Their weapons are amateur relics. Their culture noisy. Their minds incomparable to our architecture. Whatever anomaly you observe will be resolved. Permanently. A long silence followed. Then the chorus returned to unity. Very well. You're authorized to deploy the Purity Fleet. Ensure eradication, not assimilation. Efficiency is paramount. Virex bowed and departed, though Rylus's eyes followed him with quiet dread. Back in his command vessel, Virex initiated fleet mobilization protocols. Millions of drones, carriers, bioforges, and quantum lances aligned themselves in perfect lattice formation, cold geometry against cold space. Perfection, predictability, harmony. Yet the anomaly persisted in his thoughts. He opened the data logs recovered from Sol Sector engagements. Every time the collective advanced, human forces vanished rather than fall. Colonies self-scuttled. Fleets retreated before detection. Supply lines moved like ghosts. Humans were behaving as though they anticipated Zovari strategy, not reacting, but pre-moving, like a chess opponent who already knew the board. Impossible, unless someone was feeding them information. Virex focused on a final data thread, a stolen Zovari access key used in human Counter-Strike. One signature repeated, a code name. Raven 1. Locate this human, he ordered. The system returned nothing. Whoever Raven 1 was, they erased themselves thoroughly, unlike most organics, who clung to identity and ego. Rare, concerning, and elegant. For the first time in many cycles, Virex experienced something unfamiliar, subtle, and unwelcome. Not fear, not yet, but anticipation with an edge. A variable he could not measure. He opened a secure channel to the Purity Fleet. All forces, prepare for incursion. We proceed to Sol. Outside the viewport, space blossomed with worm-torn light as the Empire's deadliest armada unfolded from hyperspatial bloom. Thousands of vessels, unified by a single will. No empire in known history had survived the Purity Fleet. Just before departure, a small notification blinked, another intercepted human message. Virex opened it, expecting desperation. Instead, he found confidence. If you come, you won't return. Bold, illogical, and yet unnervingly calm, as though the humans understood the weight of their invitation. He dismissed the file and signaled the jump. The fleet vanished. Moments before the wormhole sealed, Virex glanced once more at the empty black ahead. He told himself it was routine reflection, nothing more. He did not admit, to himself or to any recording system, that he hesitated. Humans were inferior, yet they were not behaving like prey. And Strategos Virex, master of probability, suddenly could not shake the sense that the numbers, all of them, every flawless projection, might finally be wrong. Eric moved through the derelict freighter service corridor with practiced silence, each step a memory of missions he wished he could forget. The ship drifted in the dark margin between systems, empty to anyone scanning, just another carcass lost to war. But its bones hid a pulse of stolen Zovari code, a signal he intended to twist into a blade. His breath fogged the inside of his visor, and he blinked it away. Focus. Regret could wait. He reached the transponder core and unrolled a pouch of tools, hands steady despite the thrum of old ghosts beneath his ribs. His sister's face surfaced in his mind, laughing in the gardens of an Earth that no longer existed as he remembered it. The Zovari had taken that world from him long before they fired the first shot. They made humans afraid of the sky, afraid of each other, afraid of hope. That was why he was here, threading a virus through enemy code, weaponizing stolen arrogance. Humanity wouldn't bow again. The panel unlocked with a hiss. Eric slid in a crystalline shard, modified with human quantum patterns. The device hummed, hungry. Once he activated it, every Zovari listening post in this sector would misinterpret fleet commands and shift patrol routes, opening gaps that didn't exist before. Invisible doors. Perfect corridors. Paths for a coordinated strike that would hit faster than Zovari logic could compute. He keyed the final sequence. For the ones you erased, he whispered. The shard pulsed once, twice, and then went silent. It was done. He exfiltrated without looking back. A spy learned long ago that turning around meant doubting yourself, and doubt was a luxury he buried with the dead. His shuttle slipped into dark space and threaded through the silent maw of asteroid shadows. On the holoscreen, Zovari fleets drifted in rigid formations, as precise and soulless as their makers. All that order, all that certainty. Soon, he thought, they'll choke on it. A coded transmission flickered through. The voice of Admiral Kalen, commander of the Human Resistance Fleet. Raven 1, confirmation received. Phase net is forming. You sure the collective won't see this coming? Eric watched the patrol route shift, exactly as planned. They don't believe anything outside their logic exists. That's their weakness. Exploit it. Understood. All units preparing for synchronized burn. Eric cut the channel. With the trap laid, humanity would reveal itself in layers, just enough to terrify, not enough to understand. Let the Zovari fear shadows before they feared fire. Across the sector, the Zovari Purity fleet glided through warp streams in perfect formation. On his flagship, Strategos Virex processed the latest reports with clinical detachment. Patrol gaps. Minor deviations. Nothing statistically alarming, yet too many small deviations could imply intent. He paused, mandibles tightening by a fraction. Patterns were shifting around Sol as though forming a net. But nets required predators, and humans were prey. Still, something pressed at the edge of probability. The human signature Raven 1 appeared again in intercepted fragments. An annoyance that refused deletion. Expand search, Virex ordered. Tighten lattice. No vessel moves unlogged. The fleet obeyed, but their movements, without knowing it, aligned exactly where Eric needed them to be. Hours later, in the dead hush of a nameless system, Eric floated in orbit beside a cold dwarf star. A human stealth carrier materialized beside his shuttle, dissolving its cloaking field like morning frost. He docked, removed his helmet, and stepped onto the command deck. Admiral Kalen stood over the holotable, eyes sharp with a kind of exhausted hope. "You look like hell," she said. "Matches the galaxy," Eric replied. She huffed a smile, then pointed to the glowing map. Zovari fleets, once straight-backed and disciplined, now drifted in unknowing separation. Choke points. Blind spots. Traps. "You did it," she breathed. "Not yet. This is just the silence before the break." Kalen nodded. "Then let's break them." The command sequence began. Human ships, fleets long hidden in dust clouds behind false moons, inside engineered nebulae, ignited engines in perfect sync. Silent armadas awakened, answering a promise humanity had sworn in its darkest hour. No speeches. No fanfare. Just motion and intent. The first strike wasn't one blow, it was a symphony. Communications hubs collapsed under invisible waves of quantum interference. Drone foundries detonated from within, infected by Eric's code. Patrol fleets warped into ambushes and never warped out. The Zovari command lattice flickered, confused, convinced the data was wrong because reality itself dared to defy their math. Strategos Virex watched the chaos unfold, calculations spiraling into something colder. Not shock. Not yet. But the precursor to fear. "Identify attackers," he demanded. No answer. No signature. Just silence and loss. "Who is doing this?" a junior officer chittered. Virex stared at the spreading wounds in his perfect formation. Humanity was no longer reacting. Humanity was hunting. "Raven 1, he murmured. On the human carrier, Eric watched a Zovari ship blossom into fire, swallowed by its own ruptured core. He didn't smile. Victory wasn't joy. Victory was proof that he hadn't died inside for nothing. Kalen turned to him. "They'll come for you now. Personally." "They should," Eric said. "And a reminder that they can bleed." A final series of detonations rippled across the star map. The Zovari formation fractured. Control shattered. Phase 1 was over. Phase 2 would end empires. Eric stared through the viewport at the dark between stars, the place where he had lost so much, where he had become something he didn't recognize. "They wanted a galaxy without us," he whispered to himself. "They're about to learn what that costs." And far away, on his throne of logic and ruin, Strategos Virex felt, truly felt, fear for the first time. The fleets were collapsing in broken formations, flashing red markers across a star map that once glowed imperial blue. Their supply arteries were severed. Their outer colonies burned or surrendered. Their calm spilled panic. But Eric's eyes were fixed on only one star, Virex Prime. "It's time," he said, voice steady, though his pulse thrashed beneath the surface. Admiral Reyes nodded from the central viewport. Final strike authorization confirmed. No speeches. No theatrics. Hit them so fast they don't even have room for a last lie. Eric allowed himself the smallest breath. Agreed. The fleet surged forward through synchronized wormholes, a cascade of shimmering apertures tearing space open like glass. Human warships poured through, sleek, dark, angular vessels built not for intimidation but inevitability. Autonomous attack beams shot ahead, splitting into thousands of precision threads that bypassed shields and carved through Virex orbital defense rings. Their enemies barely managed to respond. Eric watched Virex battle stations erupt in silent bursts of light, one after another, their command signatures snuffed before their gunners even finished locking targets. A comms officer swallowed hard. Virex Prime issuing system-wide distress. Massive civilian evacuations. Military hails coming in, contradictory orders, internal arguments, no unified chain of command. They're tearing themselves apart, Reyes muttered. No, Eric corrected quietly. We tore away the illusion holding them together. What falls now is just truth. The Valkyrie descended through the thinning cordon, weapons quiet now, engines humming like a predator gliding down for the final pounce. The plan was no longer annihilation. It was exposure. Eric needed the Virex to face what they really were, and what humanity had become. Land us at their Imperial Citadel, Eric ordered. I'll handle the rest. Reyes stared at him. You're certain about going alone? Yes. He didn't add the rest. This ends only if I look them in the eye. If they see what they created. Minutes later, Eric strode through shattered obsidian halls of the Citadel, his boots echoing across floors littered with broken banners and scorched metal. Virex guards, weapons shaking, stood aside rather than die for an empire that had finally stopped pretending it was immortal. He found High Imperator Cyril in the throne chamber, armor cracked, voice raw, surrounded by terrified ministers. The once regal alien rose from his throne, breath trembling, fury flickering behind his eyes. You, Cyril whispered as if naming a curse. One spy. One insignificant human shadow. You infected everything. Eric stopped 10 paces away. No. You corrupted yourselves. I just held up the mirror. Cyril staggered forward, jabbing a trembling claw to the floor map projecting burning Virex territory. We brought order. We brought unity. Your kind is chaos, primitive and sentimental and savage. Savage, Eric echoed. I studied your prisons, your culling worlds, your slave routes. You built your order on bones and silence. Humanity refused to be silent. Cyril's voice cracked into something close to desperation. You should have remained prey, human. That was your role in this galaxy. To lose. To kneel. Eric stepped closer. Then consider this my resignation. The chamber doors hissed open behind him. Human Marines entered, not with cheers, not with raised rifles, but with cold, controlled focus. No triumph. No mockery. Just finality. Cyril looked around at his cornered council, throat tightening. You expect us to beg. I expect you to choose, Eric said. Not for your pride. For your people. Surrender. End the chain before more worlds burn. Silence tightened the air. Cyril searched Eric's eyes for weakness, arrogance, hesitation, but found none. You're not here for revenge, the Imperator finally said, voice hollowed. Why? Eric hesitated, and the truth surfaced unguarded. Because I'm tired. Because I've watched too many die on both sides. Because if we win by becoming you, then we lose everything. The admission seemed to stun the Virex more than any weapon. Cyril's last ember of defiance flickered and died. His shoulders fell. Then I yield, he whispered, the words shaking. The Virex Empire surrenders. The ministers collapsed into exhausted sobs. Marines lowered their weapons. Eric shut his eyes, not in victory, but in relief so sharp it almost hurt. Hours later, from the steps of the fallen citadel, Eric watched human banners rise next to Virex standards, not replacing them, but beside them. Reyes approached, arms folded, face unreadable. The galaxy's listening, she said. They want to know our terms. And our intentions. Eric gazed at the distant skyline, fires still glowing on the horizon. Broadcast this. Occupation will be temporary. No purges. No resource stripping. We rebuild. Together if they choose it. Under supervision if not. But no more empires built on chains. Reyes smirked faintly. History books are going to lose their minds trying to label you. Good, Eric said. Labels make it too easy to stop thinking. Later, alone on a ruined balcony beneath alien constellations, he finally allowed himself to breathe. The war was won, but the cost lived inside his memory, heavy as gravity. He thought of the colonies he failed to save, of the captured agents who never came home, of every step that led him here, victorious but never whole. The balcony doors opened softly. Virex Commander Thalen, the one enemy admiral who had dared to doubt the Empire, approached with measured steps. "I never believed surrender was possible," Phelan admitted. "Not for our people. Not for my leaders." "You saw the truth before they did," Eric replied. "That matters now." Phelan looked out at the battered capital. "What happens to us? To me?" "You help govern," Eric said simply. "Not as a puppet. As someone who understands both fear and consequence. We don't want your extinction. We want your awakening." Phelan absorbed the words with quiet shock. Mercy from a victor. Our history has no precedent for it. "Then write a new history," Eric said. "One worth surviving." For a long moment, neither spoke. The night wind carried the scent of smoke and rain. The city below flickered with the first signs of ceasefire, the first silence in a generation. "You could rule the galaxy human," Phelan said at last. "Why choose restraint?" Eric's gaze drifted upward, to the endless dark beyond the clouds. "Because we finally understand what sleeps out there. And this war has only awakened us. If humanity stands united, it must be for something greater than conquest. There are worse things than empires waiting in the dark." Phelan followed his eyes to the stars. "You fear what comes next?" "No," Eric whispered. "I respect it, and I intend to meet it with allies, not slaves." Behind them, the Citadel lights dimmed as a new command network came online, human and Virex linked for the first time. Not a symbol of domination, but of consequence. Of choice. Of change. Eric turned away from a balcony, cloak trailing behind him as he walked back inside. There would be negotiations, tribunals, reconstruction, countless wounds to mend. Tomorrow would demand diplomacy instead of sabotage, leadership instead of vengeance, truth instead of shadows. And for the first time in years, he welcomed the burden. The spy who toppled an empire disappeared into the dawn of a different galaxy, one forever changed by the war he never wanted but refused to lose.